I'd like to invite our first panelists up to the panel, Ellen Spear and Brenda Palms-Barber and Diana Wells. Come on up. Here's the deal, as Ross Perot used to say. They're each going to present for 10 minutes or less, and then we will have a chance for you to interact with them. And I think the best way to do this is to let them each present and then turn it to you. So first, welcome. Good morning. My introductions are going to be short, too, because they're extensive in your material. Ellen Spear comes to us from Cape Cod. She is the executive director of the Heritage Museum and Gardens in Sandwich, Massachusetts. She has made something of a career out of preserving and extending institutions. She was at the USS Constitution Museum, and you've seen old Ironsides up there. The Hancock Shaker Museum, which she revitalized, which I have visited. If she wants to try to revise another New England institution, there's an opening at the Boston Red Sox. Right. I will introduce the others in due course, if that's okay. So, Ellen, the floor is yours.
Good morning. I, too, have been responsible for chickens at Hancock Shaker Village. We had a working farm, but I didn't have as revelatory an experience as the congressman did. I was known as Ellen in the barn and her Manolo Blahniks going, ooh, 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 ooh. So chickens were not for me. I want to tell you a little bit about a story of we're at the beginning of a transition at Heritage Museums and Gardens. We're a 100-acre botanical garden and museum institution, the largest on Cape Cod, the largest display garden in southern New England. We were founded by Josiah K. Lilly 43 years ago as a place for his family's stuff and to make a nice garden around it. We have rhododendrons, we have American folk art, and everything was just fine, a small endowment until the mid-1990s. And then suddenly everything wasn't fine anymore. And financial sustainability was just not happening. The board and staff valiantly tried a lot of things, but the traditional sources of revenue for museums, which are admissions and the store, were not behaving the way they did before. The old saw in museum director school was 5% a year of increases in admissions, and your store would increase and everything would be fine. But gas crises happen, and admissions are uneven. There are opportunities on the internet to buy the same kinds of things you could only get in stores at museums before. And we realized in the work that we were doing with children, the top 10 technology jobs in 2010 did not exist in 2004. And we're training children for jobs with technology that doesn't now exist. So how do we do that? We were not addressing the staff expertise that was needed to work with children in this way. And we assumed that all we needed was more. We would go to people like you and say, if you'll only give us another grant this year, we'll be fine. If we only had a little bit more money, if we only had a little bit more resources, we could make it work. But we weren't addressing that new paradigm that Susan speaks of in her book and that the Alliance has really as their guiding principles of loyalty now with our donors was to the problem, not to our organization. They wanted to make an investment, not a gift. They wanted us to collaborate. We just thought it was a flavor of the month from foundations. We really didn't understand the scale issue. And we didn't understand that donors really wanted to get involved with their hands up, involved and in the work that we were doing. So we looked to find the center. We went back to the words of our founder, who was a very entrepreneurial person, and it struck us that he talked a lot about our being an outreaching force for education. So we decided to take that seriously. And we began to ask our colleagues on Cape Cod what the top problems in the community were. How could we engage with the community? I thought it was going to be alcohol, drug abuse, things like that. Turned out the number one issue on Cape Cod is wastewater management. And it's the thing that all of us are focused on. If you pour a glass of water on the ground anywhere in Cape Cod, it winds up in the aquifer and in the ocean in about 10 minutes. So if you come to Cape Cod and you have a well, you probably don't have to take Lipitor. There's enough Lipitor in your well water already that you could save a fortune. So that kind of illustrates the issue for us. So what were we going to do as an institution about that, and how could we connect that to sustainability? And a close second was education. How were we going to help retiring baby boomers, very educated, wanting more? How were we going to help children develop 21st century skills? So we decided to reinvent ourselves and are in the process of sharing what we know that we're best in class is, which is educating kids 4 to 9 years old in 21st century skills. And how could we reinvent ourselves as a place to be part of the education system, which we know will radically change in the next 10 years. We want to be ready when property tax stops going to the school up the street and starts going to places like ours, to be ready to educate our children. So we're having to do a lot of culture change in our organization as well. We need to look at not only a shared identity, but nimbleness, not something that you usually think about with museums. We're used to pouring a lot of money into infrastructure for new programs, and as a funder, you've been approached to say, we need the new building, we need the new this, we need the new that. The world is moving so fast that in 6 years, all of that infrastructure is obsolete, because the problem has changed and the solutions have changed. So how can we be more nimble in how we create programs? And we're looking at it that way. Outward focus, absolutely. How do we connect to our organization, to community engagement, and to solving community problems? How do we get our staff, which is not trained this way, to act like a business and to understand bottom line, and that mission and business and mission and profit are not two separate things? We also are trying in our institution to act more from an investment, de-investment philosophy instead of a budget cutting or a budget adding philosophy. Where do we want to spend those resources? And finally, and for me most important, we want to come from a place of abundance. We want to step away from the days where at museums and at our institution we say, oh, if we only, we don't have this and we don't have that and we don't have, what do we have a lot of? And we've begun to, as an institution, look at a process of saying, what do we have that we can use to make a difference? So how do we look to monetize what we have and at the same time fulfill those stewardship mandates that were given to us by J.K. Lilly and by our community? It's the land, Scarlett, for us. It's 100 acres that we are beginning to see that we can use toward wastewater management and horticultural techniques with our community. So we've begun to reach out to agribusiness in our community to work with us to develop our gardens in a new way and to really be kind of a mini R&D organization, if you will, to work with agribusiness to find a better, cleaner way to do things. Golf courses, beautiful, green, lots of chemicals. Beautiful lawns on Cape Cod, those beautiful hydrangeas, landscapers working the trucks in the morning. You have to be careful not to get hit at 6 o'clock in the morning when the trucks go out. Chemicals everywhere. So can we be the laboratory to show a better way? And can businesses use us and invest in us as their R&D facility to find better ways to do things? And we want to be a better alternative to traditional school. So we started to, I'm not a graphic designer either, worse than Susan. What this should say is demonstration bogs. We've begun to work with the cranberry industry to talk about making a demonstration bog. It's an industry that uses a lot of chemicals and a lot of stuff. We want to do it in front of the public to show a better way to create those cranberries that you'll be eating in a couple of weeks, and to adopt that potentially all throughout Cape Cod and the southern New England region, to do it a cleaner, a better way, and to have those organizations invest in us to do that. The second is to look at native species that we can grow and to better control our water usage and to share what we know with those landscapers to show them a better way to do it as well. In the education area, we realized in looking from a place of abundance that what we have is a lot of people who know a lot about how to educate 4 to 9-year-olds. What we've done is created a place called Hidden Hollow, which is an outdoor discovery area where kids can address nature deficit disorder. As I'm sure you've read, kids are outside 4 minutes a day in free unsupervised play, and they're in front of a screen for 6 hours a day. And we think that's wrong. By being outside in an environment like this, they can develop creativity, collaboration, environmental literacy, which are those 21st century skills. And lo and behold, other child-serving organizations are coming to us and saying, we'd like to learn how to do that too. So we're in the process of writing a business plan and protecting our various intellectual property to create a franchise. So we would come to other organizations, child-serving organizations, and teach them how to make a Hidden Hollow in their place. We would develop the curriculum curriculum. We would train their teachers where we have competence in abundance. And the income stream would be fees that they would pay to us annually that we would plow back into the research to create new curriculum and the measurement of how we're doing in changing 21st century skill education in our little corner of the world. Our board is looking also at how we deal with our other objects. The other thing we've got a lot of is rhododendrons. Charles Dexter hybridized 150 varieties of rhododendrons at our place. The one you probably have in your backyard is from Charles Dexter. So we are patenting our plant material, which we will sell with growers, which will create another income stream for us to be able to sustain our organization. And we don't know what we're going to do with the rest of the collections yet. Very difficult to monetize museum collections, as you know. So we're changing our revenue streams in different ways. We're looking at the knowledge franchise, we're looking at living collections and agribusiness while we'll maximize those traditional ones, which means we need new kinds of capital. We need venture capital, we need to expand opportunities for donors, we need to be more nimble, we need to be more diverse, and we have to take this in an incremental way so as not to upend those long-standing relationships that we do have with traditional funders. We're looking to new board members, new kind of staff to be able to sustain this kind of change in a different way of looking at museums. And if we do all of this, as our wonderful flume fountain there illustrates, we will have a never-ending and financially sustainable revenue stream. So I appreciate your listening to our story and hope there are many opportunities to invest in what we're doing. Thank you.
As the husband of someone who ran a museum in Santa Barbara for 10 years, this connected because I've heard lots of stories about the agonies of where the money's coming from. So when I told you that this was a diverse group, we are now going from the pastoral Cape Cod to inner city Chicago. And when you hear the innovation that we're about to hear, all I'm telling you is it's true, because it may sound like something out of a made-for-TV movie. Brenda Palms-Barber is the North Lawndale Employment Network head, but more important for our purposes, she's president and CEO of a company called Sweet Beginnings. And that's all you're going to get from me, because you're about to hear quite a remarkable story. Brenda?
Good morning. Let's get started. The first thing you should know to give a framework for why Sweet Beginnings exist is that the United States of America incarcerates more people than any other country in the world. That's 2.3 million people are currently living behind bars. 1 in 100 adults are behind bars. This means that we actually incarcerate more people than China, more people than Russia, and South Africa. But the one thing you should hold on to is that 90% of the people whom we incarcerate will be released. They come back to their communities. 700,000 men and women are released from U.S. prisons annually. In the state of Illinois, that's about 42,000 to 44,000 people each year. Of the 44,000 that are released, 50% of those folks come back to Cook County. Of the folks that come back to Cook County, 50% of that group comes back to the west side of Chicago. So bringing it locally, I work in a community called North Lawndale, and I was so excited and naive about 12 years ago when I accepted the job as an executive director of the North Lawndale Employment Network, and the community decided that the most pressing issue in our community was unemployment. So I thought, sure, yes, I can do this. I can come into this community and make a difference. And I was coming from Denver, Colorado. So some people question my ability to really kind of hang in an urban environment, right? So, but that's okay. I showed them later. So our community, and what I found is that the unemployment rate really wasn't because people were not willing to work or that they were lazy, but that in fact, we were a community deeply impacted by incarceration. Through a study that we commissioned as an organization, we learned that 57% of the adults in North Lawndale had some involvement with the criminal justice system. And you kind of have to sit with that for a minute. Nearly 60% of the adults. So basically, I decided that we had to do workforce development specifically to meet the needs of the formerly incarcerated. And we developed a quick, wonderful program called U-Turn Permitted. So U-Turn Permitted it is a cognitive-based job readiness program, but at the end of the day, we were not able to convince employers to hire these folks. And that was a little bit of my naivety. It was like, if you equip them to be competitive with skills to work, then surely they should be able to find jobs. But in fact, there was a resistance and a hesitation because folks really have valid concerns about hiring former offenders. There are liabilities involved. There is a fear that we have about people who are different, who have served time. So I decided it was important for us to launch our own business. And this was not easy. It was not overnight. But the reality is, I thought, how can I help society understand that if you have served your time for the crime, then you have served your time for the crime. And folks will be coming back out. So what we have to do is find a way for them to reintegrate back into society. So we created a business. And at the time, we didn't know that it was a social enterprise, but it was built out of frustration. It's like, we've got to show people that these folks can work. So we created Sweet Beginnings, which is a transitional jobs program for formerly incarcerated men and women. And we actually harvest and cultivate honey on the west side of Chicago, and also just expanded, and I'll tell you about that in a minute, but that we also have honey-infused products. So our social purpose in launching a social enterprise, well, number one is jobs creation. And secondly, to create an earned income strategy that would support the nonprofit work, because we needed to be independent of government funding in the long run and of private foundation in the long run. Or so that was our intent, because the chronic problem of unemployment in North Lawndale was one that I couldn't risk not having an independent funding stream. So these are some gentlemen who are currently in our program, and that's a live hive, and that's our beekeeper, John Hansen. The gentleman in red, his name is Maurice, and Maurice spent about 8 years in prison. He came out, and he had never worked a formal job. So when I interviewed him for a position, I said, well, tell me, Maurice, what kind of work experience do you have? And he said, well, Miss Barber, I've never had a job before. So I'm like, ooh, where's this going to go? And then I said, well, what kind of got you, incarcerated? And he said, well, ma'am, I was a drug dealer. I said, oh, okay. Were you a good drug dealer? And he said, well, yes, ma'am, I was. And he sat up a little taller, and, you could see he took a little pride in that. And I said, well, what made you a good drug dealer? Well, ma'am, I understood my product real well. I knew the needs of my customers. I had to maintain my inventory. I'm like, no. And he says, it's real competitive out there on the block. So he had to understand what his competitive advantage is by giving samples periodically, right? So I thought, Maurice, don't ever say you don't have work experience. You have great work experience. It was illegal, but it's good work experience. And so amazingly, we're able to take those skills and actually transition them into formal, traditional legal work. That's what we're about. So quickly, yeah, you can cheer. It's good. It's good. So why honeybees? So people are going to say, do you know anything about honeybees? No. I have to put the slide in here because we are trying to take the sting out of reentry for sure. We researched a number of different models. None of them were successful, in my opinion, because they weren't sustainable. There wasn't enough profit margin, and sometimes there weren't skill sets that met the needs of our population. But beekeeping is a profession that's been passed on through word of mouth over the years. And that resonated for me because I thought we can connect with people through storytelling. You know, who can't connect to that? And we can work with folks and develop their skills. So the other thing that's cool about working with bees is that everyone is important in the colony. Everyone has a job to do. And that job is important to the life of that colony or that community. Honey is delicious, it's local, it's healthy for you, and it really does fit into sort of where the values of our society are. But more importantly, bees do not distinguish between their sources. We see flowers, or we may see weeds, but the reality is bees don't. They just simply are about taking the good out of that plant and turning it into something that's going to be positive and good. And so it's delicious and it's wonderful. And beekeeping is really important in our country right now, and I can speak to that. So I just wanted to show you a couple of pictures. Here's some folks in our backyard actually setting up our hives, which bee season begins April 1st, and so we're getting them started there. Tons of social impact. To date, and we started actually the business in 2007. So since 2007, we've hired 213 men and women. But the most important statistic on this is that less than 4% of these folks have returned to prison. And that's remarkable when you understand that the national statistic is about 65%, and in the state of Illinois, it's 55%. And so people wonder, why? Why do you think that that's the case? It has everything, in my opinion, to do with the restoration of oneself and who they are. Beautiful picture of some of our products. Here are some folks at the Peninsula Hotel in Chicago, where we have an event there and we're vendoring. We've done a huge market analysis, just so you understand. People know that we are a business, and I know that I'm running a little tight for time. But our distribution is in Whole Foods primarily in the Midwest. We also have Beeline sales online and through Peapod. And more importantly, we're engaging in a conversation right now with the Chicago Department of Aviation, where we are the first partnership to ever have an apiary at an airport in the United States of America. And we have about almost 40 hives out there. And our next step is to actually start distribution of Beeline products at our airport in O'Hare and also Midway. So this is very very portable. We know we have competition. I won't even mention the other name there. We do want to scale deep. And we do want to scale wide, and part of that is that partnership that I just discussed with the Department of Aviation. Bee Love Bath for Men, Bee Love Home, Bee Love Baby, all of those are future scaling efforts that we have. And in conclusion, so there's another hive. I'm going to eat up Susan's little extra seconds here. That's a view from my backyard, from my office. And here's our former Mayor Daley saying that Sweet Beginnings is the perfect example of a green business operating and growing in Chicago, while also providing opportunities for those who need second chances. So our products transform skin, but our business is transforming lives. Thank you.
That is a television movie. Somebody's coming to you in the next 6 months and say, I've got to make this story. It's absolutely amazing. Well, you had two very local views. We're going to expand the global view now, thanks to Diana Wells, who, if I read her background right, has spent a couple of decades at Ashoka. And one of the things that, if not the center of her attention, is reaching out, I think globally, to find the next generation of innovators. But perhaps I ought to let her tell you what she's up to. Diana Wells.
Thank you. It's great to be here. When I first started at Ashoka as an unpaid intern in the mid-'80s, one of the things I was doing was finding non-financial resources to support the social entrepreneurs that Ashoka was finding around the world, and Library of Congress was one of the places that I came to, and I sent my team of 100 volunteers. So those of you, some of you I know in the audience, friends, know of Ashoka, and know that we are one of the organizations that help define the term and create the concept of social entrepreneurship. Social entrepreneurs are helping to solve the world's toughest problems. They offer us opportunities to see the world through a lens of solutions. They're finding the fix-its for all the problems out there. And like business entrepreneurs, they see opportunities where others see failure. They offer hope and change where others thought change was not possible. Founded by William Drayton in the early 1980s, based on this idea that it's really an individual who drives change, and looking for those individuals around the world who have a system change solution, and the entrepreneurial skill to realize that idea is really the best way to invest in social change. Ashoka has developed a sourcing methodology to go out and find these people around the world and to figure out which ideas to bet on. We see social entrepreneurs as the key drivers of innovation, of social innovation, both in the United States and around the world. And when we asked ourselves what is really the ultimate reason for social entrepreneurship, we found that it's really about building a world where everyone's a change maker. That our vision is to ensure that more people are taking charge when they see a problem and doing something about it. I'm going to walk through a couple of examples of folks around the world who we found and the change that they're unleashing. Key to Ashoka's core function is that it is the individual who drives change. And Margaret Mead said it, there's nothing, if you ever doubted that a small group of committed people will change the world, it's the only thing that really has. At the time, in the 1980s, this was a very radical idea and a major shift for promoting change in the world. It's not big amounts of money. It's not experts going from one place to another to teach. It's not about giving a fish or teaching a fish. It's about finding the people who know the fishing industry and are going to revolutionize it. So Ashoka's network now is more than 2,500 folks around the globe who are driving change. We are constantly on the lookout for adding these folks. We have staff in 30 countries who are sourcing these people and putting them through our very rigorous process. At the same time, we recognize that these individuals are doing a couple of critical things that speak to our Everyone a Changemaker vision. One, they're demonstrating that change is possible, helping people recognize and believe that change is possible. And two, that every individual has a role to play. Everyone has a role to play. A couple of examples. Breit Simons in Ghana recognize that rural individuals who may be illiterate have an opportunity to verify that the pharmaceuticals that they're getting from their local pharmacy and distributor can be verified. And he's developed a system through text messaging that goes directly to the manufacturer off the label of the pharmaceutical to make sure that it's safe and verified. He did this because, as Alliance for Global Good is doing, recognize that there is that through an alliance of manufacturers, distributors, and customers, there is a key ingredient of accountability where everyone wins. We see another example from Giroux Bilmoria in India, who recognized the increase in street kids in Bombay, and when she started in 1996, created a helpline for street kids to connect with the available social service resources that were there, but the kids didn't know how to find them. And she has the street kids themselves answering the telephone, directing their peers to the resources. These years later, Childline is up and running in 150 countries around the world. And Giroux is off to her third enterprise, which is getting governments to sign on to a commitment that every child graduating from public school will have a bank account. She's moved from servicing and creating the system where street kids themselves are the change maker, helping direct services to their peers. In the United States, Darrell Hammond, right here in D.C., was horrified when 2 kids died playing in a used car, in an abandoned car in a lot here in Anacostia, and decided that his mission in life was to make sure that every child in America had a playground to play on. For 12 years, he worked with corporations to get funding and volunteers to build playgrounds. 2 years ago, he open-sourced the playground build model, putting it out there on the web. And in the next year, they built more playgrounds through this open sourcing methodology than he had in the 12 years previously. Darrell has a terrific book called Kaboom, which is the name of his organization. Last example here is Mary Gordon from Canada, helping middle school kids learn empathy. Why? Because in this world where change is increasing so rapidly, where every day we're encountering more and more people who are not from our neighborhood or not from the house next door, we need to understand how to work with and communicate those. She's found a way in the classroom to get young people sensitized to being empathetic, the social and emotional skills, and she correlates those, her schools to vastly decreased bullying on the playgrounds almost immediately. So 4 examples of individuals who have big system change ideas that Ashoka has brought into our network, given a small amount of individual financial support so they can quit their job, work full-time, and grow their idea. The benefit of now having 2,000 plus, nearly 3,000 individuals like this around the world is that we can see patterns. I use the example of Ashoka is like the equivalent of what an epidemiologist does, but instead of looking at incidences of diseases, we're looking at solution sets that arise, and we can recognize patterns. Empathy is one of them, that these individuals have a talent, as my fellow panelists here, of recognizing a problem and not stopping there, but actually doing something about it. We have another pattern where each of these people, as we're bringing them through our selection process, we see that they started as young people. Again, a pattern that we can see because we have a broad network, and finding ways to ensure that more young people, that we at Ashoka can now work with young people to ensure that they have experiences to make change possible, because it's what has made these folks that we found as adults. It was those early experiences as young people that kept them going. Bill Drayton's genius, in part, is that in tracking early stage innovation, we see a predictive factor for future trends. And our guess at these future trends right now, and in terms of solutions of where the world is going, empathy is key. Teamwork, a team of teams. No one person is going to guide the world or guide an organization anymore. It is a team of teams that is going to be necessary. So empathy and teamwork are key critical skills as we build the next generation of innovation. Just to give you a sense of how we think about how we do and the evidence of the social entrepreneurs in our network. We're tracking the impact of those individuals. How many years later are they still working toward their vision? If you compare to small businesses, failures, 3 out of 10 are working 3 years later. 98% of our folks are still in the game working on those solutions 5 and 10 years later. We track by not the growth and scale of organizations, but by independent replication. And in the social world, so different from the business world, that you need others to find and implement your idea. You need to, it's not about profit, it's not about size, but it's about spreading the idea if you're really after that social goal. I'll stop there. Thank you. The everyone a change maker view is so aligned with Alliance for Global Good, and those qualities of teamwork, empathy, and change-making skills are why we have been so happy to be here today and part of the Alliance. Thank you.
We promised you specificity. I think we're off to a rather remarkable start. We've got one microphone here. Is there one? Yes, we have microphones at either end. So if you've got a comment, just raise your hand. I'm going to take moderator's privilege. We're going to do a lightning round, okay? I know this is ruthless, and I'm sorry. But I got one very quick question for each of you, okay? One, were the participants in your program, who obviously came from challenged environments, was the program itself the sort of thing where you saw a rather rapid change in their approach to honest labor in general, to not looking to scam you?
You know, they go through our U-Turn Permitted program first. And that's a means by which for us to get to know who they are, how they perform, and are they serious? Do they want a job or do they want to work? And so we're able to differentiate that. So by the time they're eligible to be interviewed for a job with Sweet Beginnings, we have a pretty good sense of who they are and their character. And so, and we actually do peer-to-peer interviews. So people who are currently working in Sweet Beginnings are the folks who interview potential employees. So I think that they're good at deciding, is this person serious or not?
And so the people in the program are also a kind of your eyes and ears to make sure that the new ones...
Absolutely, yes.
Do you have any concern at all when you move into a kind of sustainable market-based notion that your traditional givers will say, great, we're off the hook?
Rather than, no, I think it's quite the other way, because I think there's a certain amount of donor fatigue for the same program, for the same thing year after year, but looking at community issues and never seeing any intersection. I'm seeing, even at the beginning of this, our donor base being more energized and being able to invest in solving a community problem. And that's much more exciting than giving for the annual fund to keep the lights on.
When you look at these fellows and you see that they're succeed. Well, first of all, I only want to do one question. Do you have a follow-up to make sure that what the fellows tell you they are going to do, they are doing? Mm-hmm. How's the accountability work at that when they're thousands of miles away?
Mm-hmm. So we do have offices in 30 countries. We invest so much front-loaded in our vetting process that we are. And key criteria there are trust and, ethical fiber, et cetera. We have built a relationship with these folks in the process with lots of face-to-face time in the selection process. That said, we do connect regularly at touch points twice a year during the period where they're receiving a stipend, but they are always and forever a member of our alliance. And we have a series of non-financial support services that continue to draw them in, to offer services and connect. And we do a survey 5 and 10 years out, which is where that impact data comes from.
Okay, thanks. Who's got a question, comment, intervention, whatever? Okay, back there. We'll get...
Good morning. I'm Mickey Atchurch with one of the Alliance Partner Hunt Alternatives Fund. So Susan said one of our goals was to learn something today. So check, I already had, and drank a cup of coffee. So we're good. I have 2 questions, and you can pick and choose which ones apply to you. I actually am interested in monitoring and evaluation, and a number of indicators that you put up there. And if you could share some of these lessons learned in capturing your impact. Because it's often too great to see those numbers, like Barbara, your statistics of 4% just blew me away. Even if it weren't bolded there, it was very important. But how do you capture the stories that really change people's lives so profoundly that numbers do not do? And most of our organizations do that kind of work. And then second is maybe more to the policy influence. How do you measure that? How do you know what you're doing is really not just changing 30 people's lives or 1,000 people's lives, but impacts millions and helps, frankly, governments and systems to change what they do?
Okay, it's a jump ball.
I'll start. Okay. In terms of, I love the question, because what I wasn't able to say is one of the ways that we do measure impact is the restoration not only of that individual, but of our families, their families, and of our community. And so I'll tell you that one of the things, Maxwell Dupree talks about what makes you weep, and in his book, In Leadership is an Art. And one of the things that absolutely makes me weep is seeing when a man who has served 8 years behind the wall comes out, goes through our programming, and makes a point to tell me that he was able to buy a birthday present for his daughter because he hadn't been able to do so for the last 8 years with, quote, honest money, right? That's very much in part what it's about. It's about a person being able to purchase a car for the first time, or get an apartment for the first time, open up a banking account, pay taxes, and walk tall. And you see the sparkle in their eyes. And those are the kinds of qualitative experiences that we are able to still capture in a quantitative way as well. So those are the impacts. In terms of our relationship with government and policy, absolutely. Some people know that Congressman Danny Davis helped to lead an effort around the Second Chance Act. We've been very involved with influencing policy at the local level. With Cook County, for example, and with the city of Chicago, one of the policy wins that we had was the question, have you ever been incarcerated, on job applications for the city? And I'm happy to say that that question has been removed. Because what does that have to do really with your skill set and your contributions? Now, we do have what's called sealing. So we can seal your record, but your record still exists. It doesn't go away. But we want to make sure employers are hiring folks who can do the job and not close the door on any opportunity. So that's just a couple of examples of some policy wins.
In Chicago, removing that question would be helpful to a lot of Chicago city officials. Anyway, I'm
most
sorry.
Most recent governor, yeah. Maybe that's why it asks so much.
For us, using technology has been a big part of the story, where the mothers, if you will, of Hidden Hollow have gotten together to tell their children's stories and to share those stories with us. One of them that sticks with me that they use on blogs is in the space where kids come together to play. 5-year-old girls are busy playing with water, and a bunch of 7-year-old boys run out into the space, and you think there's trouble. But the mother's story is about these kids beginning to collaborate and work together in different ways, and suddenly they're problem solving and they don't even realize it, and they're helping each other, and they're building things together, and they're sharing ideas in a group that you would never think would work together. So we're trying to capture all of those stories. The research piece is a little bit harder for us in terms of trying to capture real change in the creativity quotient in kids. We've begun to work with the school systems, but that's going to be a 5 or a 10-year measurement that we're going to need to do, and we're just at the very beginning of that. From the policy perspective, it's been interesting that we had been viewed as a tourism industry, as a museum that catered to tourists, and we really were not part of economic development. Since we've started to talk the language of business, we are now at the table for economic development. And as wastewater issues are being discussed, I think we've begun to convince the leadership on Cape Cod that education is a part of the solution to our wastewater management issues, and bringing in institutions like ours to work with businesses is kind of erasing some of those silos. So the seat at the table is the beginning for us in public policy.
You want to weigh in on this, please?
So for Ashoka, we have this challenge of incredible diversity. We can't count acres, we can't count lives saved because there's such an array of diversity over such geography. So what we did is come up with a couple of proxy indicators that we wanted to track that was looking at, are these folks reaching the kind of scale and change that we're looking for? So independent replication, are they still working at their idea? Because we say we're looking for the entrepreneur who's going to stop at nothing till this is reached. And we also have the humility to recognize that we are not the entrepreneurs who are unleashing these things. We give the dignity to the individual who is going to change the system. So we track proxies. Is there evidence of their leadership? Is there evidence of policy change at the national, regional level? Are they independent? Do they know of other organizations that have taken their idea and are moving with it? On the independent replication, we rely on self-reported surveys, which is tricky. But at the same time, we do a subset of site visits and verification. The other piece on the qualitative data that is critical, I think, is not only interviewing the person, but the sort of end user, so the ultimate beneficiaries. And David Brombright uses this nice phrase, constituent voice, as a methodology to capture that.
Just making a point, if you can also address questions to a specific panel member. And for those of you who are frustrated, if you haven't gotten a question, at the end of the day, we've got this town meeting. We've set aside the last part of it. All of the people who are on these panels will be there. So you'll have a chance to raise questions you may not have had a chance to in these individual meetings. So that's what we want to do. You have a question?
Sneed, and I work in philanthropy and disability justice. I've been thinking a lot about kind of new leadership in existing organizations, and seeing as Ashoka is in the business of supporting social entrepreneurs, if the issue currently, at least in America, is this kind of hyper-proliferation of nonprofits, right? There's 1.4 million here. How is Ashoka helping social entrepreneurs to, instead of creating their own 501c3, embed themselves in existing organizations that may have been around for 30 years but could be more effective, more efficient, and better marketed? Mm-hmm. So what partnerships are happening there? I'd really like to hear more. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it speaks right to this team of teams point that, one of the ways that Ashoka is doing it is now that we have this critical mass and we're seeing these patterns, we're trying to catalyze those individuals to work together. And that's something that's happened for a long time. When we were doing the surveys 10 years ago, one of the things that people said is the value of the Ashoka Network. First was, that selection process was, those questions have stuck with me. They were really even more valuable than the funding. But 10 years later, they were saying, the value of this network globally is that I understand how my individual intervention fits within a broader whole of how to change the system. And more, we are developing cohorts and groups that are really driving toward a particular issue. So around our work around empathy, we have a cohort of 6 fellows in the U.S. who are our sort of working group. And together, their networks, their interventions at the elementary school level, at the middle school level, at the different networks that they have and relationships with different bloggers or writers, that the sum is greater than the parts.
This question is for Ellen and Brenda. To listen to you both, you would conclude that all humanity loves risk. But all humanity doesn't love risk. There are a lot of people who are very comfortable with doing very safe things, like applying for a grant from a foundation or giving you a check for what it is you want to do. So could you tell us a little bit about what the battle was? You know, we've had the success. We've seen the success. What was the battle? How do you deal with the fact that you're talking about really risky ventures that could fail, and boards that tend to be risk averse, and funders that tend to be risk averse? What do you do? What have you done with risk?
I still would like the check. Failing that, I think at Hancock Shaker Village and where I am now, the board had come to a recognition that everything we knew was not working. So I think the table was set for us to do something differently. One thing that I've tried, since the skills in the board that we had were not necessarily the skills for an entrepreneurial enterprise, and it takes time to change those boards, is we set up a business advisory council. I went out and found the smartest people I knew about how to run these businesses, which was knowledge that we did not have within the organization and knowledge that we didn't have within the board. And this outside business advisory council, we would bring them business and risk ideas and venture ideas, and they would help us refine those ideas. And lo and behold, someone stood up at the meeting and said, you know, we could really connect you with capital as well. And that was a startling idea. So they began to be the vetting process for us, the people with that knowledge. So then when a recommendation from this group came to the board had the comfort level that a group of very practiced and successful business leaders had wire-brushed this model as much as possible before we put it into practice.
So, yes, we work with bees that make people uncomfortable. We work with former offenders. They also make people uncomfortable. So we're kind of in the business of trying to bridge the differences. And we have two boards. I have a nonprofit organization, the North Lawndale Employment Network, and that board, and actually I'm really pleased to say my board chair is here. Dr. McAvee is here. So nice to have your board support. But also my social enterprise board is very different. They're wired differently. North Lawndale Employment Network is very risk adverse, and they're very concerned about the parent organization maintaining its financial sustainability. And oftentimes they will say, what is the drag, what drag is Sweet Beginnings having on NLEN? Whereas the NLEN board, Sweet Beginnings board rather, is all about, the risk and the challenge, and they understand business. And so my challenge has been, how do I create a culture where, and more transparency between these two entities so that there's bigger and larger buy-in on both. But fundamentally, we know that we're dealing with a crisis in our community, and people were willing to help us create this business because they saw the landscape out there, and we knew that there weren't jobs just readily available. And so we also, to gain confidence, we partnered with the Boeing company, and they helped us develop our business plan. Because again, we had to have external thought leaders. Now you might think it's interesting because Boeing is a aerospace company, right? But they were looking to do work in a community, and they were sort of bored with painting houses and picking up trash. And so I said, well, let's use your intellectual your intellectual gifts and help us think through a business plan. That helped our board also feel more comfortable with the risk that we were going to take.
I'm looking okay.
Brenda?
Yes.
You're all the greatest. This is a fantastic panel, and you could cry from the things you hear. But it seems like the Cook County prison system is very innovative. Tom Dorrit, I don't know if you work with Tom. He's the sheriff.
Not personally, but we're working with them now.
You and Tom should take this national to the prison systems. And if any of our leaders from Congress or Senate are here, it cures recidivism. I mean, yes. and unemployment.
Yes, we're creating jobs.
So you and Tom should take this, across the country. I know you don't have that much time, but amazing.
Thank you. And I'll just say that, forgive all these puns, but you got to use them, right? So our vision is to pollinate this model across the country. And where there are vacant lots, And where there are airports, where there's high mass incarceration rates, we have a low overhead solution. This is a market-driven solution to a large social unmet need. And so, absolutely.
So what she's really saying is be all you can do. Sorry. We're going to take a 15-minute break, and then when we come back, technology. Since it's changing everything else, how might it and is it changing the world of social enterprise? Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.